Hello guys, welcome back to my channel and enjoy this fanfic part 4. Now let's start the fanfic. Racing towards the fortress, Kakashi couldn't help but start thinking of scenarios that could be happening and reasons why the ambush had not been spotted ahead of time when the answer hit him. Either the fortress had been rigged and fortified with seals a long time ago, or one of the new enemies was at the least proficient with fuinjutsu. Cursing, he sped up, each Jonin heading to a different team, hoping that they would be able to save their genin. Ino's team. Coughing as the dust cleared, Ino groaned. When they had opened the door, they had not been expecting a trap to go off immediately. Thankfully, Haku had managed to quick ice shield to protect them from the worst of it. Looking over at her teammates, she could see that Choji and Haku were alright, if not a little shaken from the trap, just like she was. At least it wasn't just her. Is everyone alright? Haku asked as she stood and dusted herself off. She had reacted on pure instinct. She had never been more thankful for the hellish training that Zabuza had put her through until then. Why? Yeah, Choji replied. Looking into the room, he squinted, trying to find out if there had been anyone inside or if it had been a rigged trap for any intruders done long before they had gotten there. Inside stood a lone man watching them carefully. I'm surprised that you survived. That should have you. He mused, looking more clearly at the team. Genin most likely. That means that there is a Jonin somewhere. Interesting. There is a Yamanaka and an Akamichi, but no Nara that I can see. Was there one in the class, or did they not get along? He thought. He had told the bandits that this would happen if they weren't more careful, but they hadn't listened to them. Now they had to deal with pesky shinobi. Shrugging, he focused on the task at hand. He didn't think that he would have much trouble with the two known ninja, but the other girl was baffling him. Who was she, and why was she filling in for Inara? There surely wasn't a way that she was a better tactician, or that her skills would complement theirs more than Inara's could there. I know who the two besides you are, or rather the clan and techniques that they use, but I can't place you with any Konoha clan I am aware of. A Kurama perhaps. No, you are to train to be a member of that clan. They rarely, if ever, focus on physical training. Could you in fact be Inara? No, that can't be it either. You don't have the clan crest or typical clothing choice. No feral markings of the Inuzuka clan or the code of the Aburame. Definitely not a Hyuga, and the Uchiha were Ald. That does leave the Sarutobi clan. He mused out loud. Haku narrowed her eyes as he tried to place her and thus her techniques. He's good, she thought to herself. Well, I think that it is incredibly rude not to introduce yourself before trying to figure out who I am. Haku snapped at the man as she began to subtly analyze the room. Don't concern yourself with that. Regardless, you will have to show me your techniques if you want to leave alive. He said as he shifted his stance and then blurred out of sight. Years of training with Zabuza to master the silencing technique allowed Haku to quickly pinpoint his location as she lashed out with her foot, catching him in his abdomen. Could you perhaps not be a genin? He asked, eyes narrowed. He had been moving at Jonin level speed, and yet she had caught him as if she could follow his movements. Be on guard. He is at least Jonin in speed. Approach this if you are doing survival training with Sasuke. Haku whispered to her teammates, who nodded in understanding. Taking a deep breath to focus themselves better, they looked towards the enemy wearily. While they were used to sparring with Sasuke, he was still leagues above them in skill. However, they were nearly relieved when the enemy started to weave seals that they recognized. Ino moved next to Haku while Choji shifted behind. Both girls flying through the same seals. Kaden. Gokaku no Jutsu. Sweden. Teppadama, they called simultaneously. The jutsu collided and exploded. As steam enveloped the room, the enemy cursed. He had not expected 2 of 3 to know elemental jutsu. Even more so for a Yamanaka to know them. Most clans focused on clan training and nothing else. It seemed that what he knew of the 2 clan ninja needed to be amended. Perhaps it was luck that made him move, however. He wasn't going to question it as he felt something sail past his face even as several objects impaled his legs. Standing shakily, he quickly found that he should have placed far more scrutiny on the unknown as his limbs were stubbornly refusing to work properly. Sinban most likely. They pierced pressure points. She must be a medic in training. His thoughts were cut short as he saw a massive object moving through the steam towards him, and just as he moved to avoid it he realized what it was. Unfortunately it was too late to move out of the way of the fist thrown by the Akamichi in front of him. A loud crack sounded through the room and then silence. With Neji's team, the two Hyuga stood carefully and looked around the destroyed room apprehensively. They had just barely caught sight of the exploding tags when the door had opened and jumped back, grabbing Lee in the process. Thankfully they had, otherwise they would not have been able to move. "Are you alright, Neji-ni-san?" Hinata asked. "Hi." Sighing, she turned to look at Lee and smiled as he flashed a bright smile. "That explains it." "Two Hyuga." A voice rang out coldly. Turning their heads to look at the owner, they were confronted with an imposing 6.5-foot mountain. "I take it that you set those explosions off." Neji snarled. The man smirked coldly and shifted his sight back to Hinata. "The heiress herself. I should feel honored, right?" he sneered. Hinata said nothing as she slid into her personal stance and waited, Byakugans blazing. Next to her, Neji and Lee fell into their own stances. Growling at being ignored, the mountain rushed forward, hoping to catch the genin off guard, only to dodge at the last minute to avoid a palm thrust to the chest. "You are faster than you look," Neji dryly noted. The man sneered in anger and rushed forward once more. Weaving through his attacks, Hinata began watching for an opening. One that the team got when Lee slammed his foot into the side of the man's head. Lucky for us, so is Lee. Skidding across the room even as several strikes landed, the man showed a surprising amount of agility as he flipped and landed on his feet. "I see. You are at a disadvantage," Hinata whispered, catching his attention. "Your coils show minimal usage, meaning all of your chakra goes to supplementing your taijutsu. A Hyuga is the worst opponent you could have gotten." As the dance between taijutsu users began once more, the man before them slowly began to lose momentum with every strike landed by Neji and even the feeling in the limbs struck by Hinata. Every time he managed to get inside of their guard, he was knocked away by the green-wearing kid, allowing his teammates to recompose themselves. Despite his rage growing at not being able to land a hit, he was forced to fight defensively as most of his chakra points had been shut off. Unfortunately, against a Hyuga, let alone two, and a kid who only had taijutsu that didn't last long. Neji, that seemed as if he had some kind of problem with the Hyuga clan. Lee said just as Hinata landed a lightning-enforced Juken strike to the heart. Must have been a Kumo nin that felt that the country got ripped off 9 years ago. Came a cold reply. Shikamaru's team. Left, right, duck. Were the thoughts racing through Shikamaru's mind as he watched his enemy carefully. Shino, Fu and himself had received very mild injuries as a result of the explosion. However, Fu had recovered thanks to the Nanabi and had quickly began to treat their injuries. They had been forced to abandon medical treatment when they had been attacked. Their opponent seemed quite skilled in stealth and had tried to take them unaware. Unfortunately, he had developed something of a sensory field with his shadow manipulation. He had been experimenting with it, and while it was still in development, he had spread it out as soon as he could. Thankfully he had. Unfortunately, the enemy was proving to be a very difficult opponent to hit. Not just his stealth but speed and flexibility seemed to be strong points as well. However, Shikamaru only needed to get him still for one moment, just long enough to pull off their attack. Hiden. Rinpungakur no Jutsu, a cloud of powder filled the enemy's vision, and unfortunately, he would never see anything again as a dual Kaiden. Gokaku no Jutsu engulfed his body and ignited the powder, claiming his life and causing a second explosion. Didn't know it was flammable. Fu mused aloud. Naruto's team. So Sasuke want to bet on when the next time we get a mission that doesn't go wrong will be. Naruto called out to his friend, who had developed a very dangerous tic in his left eyebrow. As soon as the explosion had gone off, Sasuke had shielded his team with Susanoo, and from there the situation had deteriorated. They had been attacked by a ninja who had immediately recognized the Uchiha clan's unique technique and had gone postal at seeing it. Sasuke could only guess that he had run into Itachi or Shisui back when he was still alive and was still sore from the loss, either that or fought in the last war. Stop moving so I can you. The enemy nin screamed, making Ten groan. What kind of idiot would stop moving so that they could bead? Damn it bitch, that hurt. He snapped as one of her kunai finally reached its mark. As soon as Sasuke and Naruto saw the mark, they grinned broadly and nodded to one another. Jumping back, they began weaving seals at the same speed. Kaden. Gokaku no Jutsu. Futon. Repusho. The wind-enhanced fireball tore through the room, devouring everything in its path. Tensing his body and preparing to jump out of the way, the nin gained a look of panic as he realized why they had finally fallen back and away from taijutsu. The kunai that had nicked him earlier had a paralytic poison on it. No longer able to move, he watched helplessly as the fireball engulfed him. Well, that seemed anticlimactic. Ten flatly mused. Naruto laughed a little. That may be true, however, it was worth seeing if the strategy would work. Although you need to remember that we taught you the puppet jutsu for a reason. He groaned, making the girl laugh sheepishly as she gathered the scattered weapons that had survived the jutsu. Standing straight and turning to her team, she was greeted with the sight of Sasuke removing the head of the nin after he let out a groan of pain. You held back. He accused the blonde, who pouted. So did you. Ten groaned. They couldn't really be the hope for their future, could they? It didn't take long for the genin to meet up with the jonin after their fights concluded. The jonin were understandably surprised, but then understood that each of the enemy nin, while strong, had underestimated their strength as a team. Finishing the last of the bandits, they sealed everything of value and left the fortress, detonating exploding tags as they went. In the jonin's opinion, the genin had performed remarkably well. They had little to no trouble with their enemies and had played off of each other's strengths. Perfect timing allowed for excellent combinations in a quick fight. Minor injuries from the explosion had been quickly healed, and after informing the nearby villages that the mission had been a success, the group headed back to training camp. Kakashi, we need to work on making sure that there is a talented sensor on each team that is using their talents subconsciously at all times. Naruto said as they arrived back at their makeshift home. Admittedly, those of us that have sensory abilities weren't using them, as we didn't expect much in the way of resistance. However, had the teams been any slower, any one of us could have been hurt or worse. Sasuke nodded and flinched when he realized that he hadn't taken the mission that seriously. As it is Sasuke and I need to work on taking mundane missions like these seriously again. We messed up on that one. The future Hokage admittedly, wincing to himself. Nodding at the boy's suggestion, Kakashi began to modify the genin's training schedule to reflect the necessary changes. He had agreed that the team needs slightly more work and knew just how to go about it. In the aftermath of the first mission, the genin found their training doubled and more exercises added in. Apparently, Kakashi had taken the suggestion for a sensor on every team and decided to make sure that they all had some sensory ability. How did he do that when sensors were rare? Well, when you start getting sneak attacked at night after a hard day's worth of training, then you tend to pick up on the little things like that. After everyone had gotten the hang of basic sensory techniques, they were put to the test so that they were always on. For Hinata and Neji, this meant using their chakra to create a net that they would be able to track moving objects in. This also meant that they had to learn how to make their chakra thin and invisible to other sensors. Of course, this meant trying to get it past Naruto, easier said than done. Despite that, they were back to doing missions in no time, and by the time they reached the midway point in their training, they had done well over 50 C-rank missions. Kakashi would also get multiple missions in the same area and have the teams do them all at once in order to get them used to working in a wartime setting where breaks were rare. Despite this, there were few if any problems. That was also when they got the surprise of their lives. Congrats everyone. Naruto and Sasuke just told me that you have surpassed your skill levels from the 5th war. Good work. Kakashi congratulated the genin who were twitching. However, you are still not ready for the Jubi or Madara. Are you kidding me? Ino yelled. How the hell could they not be ready for the fourth war yet if they had surpassed their levels from the fifth war? Nope, Sasuke said, and the two nodded at each other. If you want to know how you aren't ready, then we will show you exactly where we were when we fought against Madara and the Jubi. Bear in mind that neither of us were a match for them. Naruto said, and the two let the control they had on their chakra fall. Almost instantly they were coated in chakra and the ground seemed to almost shy away from the force that they were exuding. Naruto was almost instantly engulfed by gold, flame-like chakra, and black markings quickly made their way across his body. Grunting a little at the force of the chakra, the two looked at their comrades who were staring in shock. Then just as quickly as it arrived, the presence dropped, leaving almost no trace that it had been there. That is where we were, and we could barely fight Madara. Guy with all 8 gates open only slowed him down for the 15 seconds it took for him to regenerate the damage that it took. That is what you are up against. Bear in mind that Sasuke and I couldn't beat Madara, nor could we stop him. Naruto said, wincing a little as he moved his arm. Are you alright, Dobi? My body still isn't ready to bear the force of Kyuubi's chakra. What I can use I can't use for long. My reaction times aren't back to normal and Senjutsu is out of the question right now. This isn't good, I may still need it to fight Orochimaru. He groaned. Holy shit. Madara is stronger than you too. I almost passed out when your chakra flared. Ino exclaimed, feeling fear creep into her. Yes, but remember, we still have time before we face Madara. We also know who resurrects him, and as far as we know, he is the only person other than Orochimaru that knew where to find his remains. Sasuke pointed out, making the genin nod in fear. After a second, Naruto sat down tiredly and looked at the Jonin. I need advice. Sasuke and I have come to a roadblock that we need to pass before we can go any farther. The Jonin gave a startled expression and sat down, signifying a break. In the second phase of the Chunin exams, Orochimaru attacks Team 7 and gives Sasuke the cursed seal of heaven. I've already told some of you this, however, this is the problem that we are having. The seal is a major contributing factor in Sasuke's defection from the hidden leaf. Not only did it allow Orochimaru to access his mind, it forced his darker emotions and ambitions to the forefront of his mind and made him even more obsessed than he already was. Preventing that would ensure that there are no hiccups down the road. Even though I know that Sasuke is more mentally sound this time around, it still has its risks. Naruto explained. Asuma tilted his head and blinked in curiosity. Like what? A 10% chance of survival. Mental instability. The ability to be controlled and manipulated. Personality changes. Naruto rattled off. What is there to question then? It should be prevented, right? 1010 asked. However, it also allows the recipient to access Senjutsu without the training and get a quick power boost that could easily place an average genin on the same level as a Jonin or even an Anbu. Naruto pointed out, making the genin blink. Sasuke had mastered the seal to the point that he could pull Senjutsu through his Susanoo. It was actually a powerful tool in his arsenal. However, the Senjutsu is tainted and easily able to overcome the person using it and make them dependent on it. I have developed a seal that can remove the negative aspects of the seal and purify the Senjutsu, but Sasuke and I are unsure if we want to allow this to happen or whether or not it is worth it. He could learn Senjutsu on his own, so it isn't like he is cut off of it, but the seal negates the limitations of the real thing. Limitations? Kakashi asked, having never heard of it before. The time to gather the Senjutsu, the time limit to using it while moving, and the fact that you can't gather the Senjutsu while moving. At least, I haven't found a way yet. Naruto sighed. Kakashi nodded. Those would be limits worth overcoming. I see. Add in the fact that Sasuke may die this time around and you have a very big risk. You have to factor in what will happen if Orochimaru fails to give him the seal this time as well. Shikamaru pointed out. The clearing went silent as the group tried to decipher the complex problem presented. All of a sudden, Fu's eyes light up. You said that the main reason to have the seal was to keep Orochimaru from changing the plans and alleviate the constraints of Senjutsu, right? If that is true, Then why don't you make a seal that can isolate the heaven seal as soon as it is placed, preventing its influence from spreading? Then after a preset amount of time remove the seal slowly so that if anyone is watching it they won't know until it is too late. That would also give you enough time to devise a seal that mimics the senjutsu portion of the seal and use that to eliminate the weaknesses that you pointed out in the use of senjutsu. Brilliant. Naruto breathed in wonder. Sasuke felt his eyes widen in wonder. How had they not thought of that? It allows them to take both courses of action and allows the Dobi to use his senjutsu more freely. It also means that he would be less reliant on the power of a madman. You are an absolute genius, Fu. Sasuke proclaimed in excitement. All the months of worry had instantly vanished. How will you convince Orochimaru that you have in fact received and are suffering the effects of the seal if it is isolated the moment you get it? Ino asked in confusion. I know how it felt the first time and I am a shinobi. I can act as if it has taken root and place a very subtle genjutsu on him to make him see what he wants to see. Sasuke replied happily. The group nodded, pleased that they had solved the problem, and then moved back to their training. Back in Konoha some time later. I see. The group has done an impressive amount of missions in the time that you were away, and from your reports your genin are quite a bit more powerful. Hiruzen said after reading the reports given to him by the Jonin in front of him. He had to admit that when the large group had entered his office he almost hadn't recognized them. The genin barely looked as if they had just graduated from the academy and looked more like veteran shinobi. They were alert and almost tense even though they were in friendly territory. Although it seems as if you have trained them for war, why is that? You can never be too cautious. However, now that you mention it, Kakashi mused and turned to the genin. Relax, you are on vacation until the Chunin exams begin. However, I want each of you to practice your individual chakra exercises. Understood. All of the genin almost instantly deflated at the declaration and went back to looking like new genin. Impressive, isn't it? Asuma whispered at seeing the Sandame's face. If need be they have the intimidation factor and at the same time they can make the enemy underestimate them merely by relaxing. Despite their looks however, they are still quite alert. The Sandame had to admit that it was indeed impressive. He had never seen anything like it. Just what kind of training did you do to get this effect on them? Almost immediately the genin had looks of horror on their faces and they began muttering things that suspiciously sounded like evil, sadist, hell, ambushes, and even, first rule of Kakashi's training: do not speak about Kakashi's training. Sweat dropping he released the group from his office and sighed as the elders walked in almost instantly. I see they have returned. I still say letting them leave was a big mistake. I know that Homura, but would you rather raise suspicion in front of the other Jonin and Genin? One of which was Inara. That is true, but I still don't like it. Kaharu sniffed. I also know that they may have held things back from their reports. There is no way that they spent that much time getting the genin up to mid-chunin level, but I have no way to prove it. Questioning that in front of the genin would not have gone over well either. Hiruzen sighed. It seemed that the longer they tried to figure out what happened, the more confusing everything got. He was too old for this. With Naruto. Is there something that I can help you with? I came with a proposition if you are interested. I will think about it, Danzo. Naruto said before disappearing, revealing himself to be a shadow clone. How did he know what I was about to ask, and how did he know that I was following him? 4 days later. As many of you know, the Chunin exams are coming up and any genin that has completed 8 missions is eligible to enter. The Sandame said to the group in front of him. Sandame-sama, I don't mean to question you, however there is something that has been bothering me for some time now. Kakashi spoke, making everyone turn to look in horror at the Jonin who was on time. If the requirement is so generic and lenient to boot, how do we still have genin after the Chunin exam? There is no level requirements for the missions so long as 8 have been successfully completed. That means that if a Jonin wanted to quit trying, they could complete 8D ranks and then nominate their genin. If they fail, there is nothing to worry about because genin fail all the time, but if they die, no one questions the Jonin's training methods or the missions that they had done. Shouldn't there be a level requirement? The room broke into murmurs as the man's words sunk in. They had never thought about that before. Why were the requirements to qualify so low? I understand what you are saying, Kakashi, but I have full trust in my Jonin not to do something so reckless. Now then, we will start with the rookie teams. As soon as he said this, many of the Jonin as well as Iruka thought that they would pass up on the chance. After all, they hadn't been ninja near long enough. I, Hitaki Kakashi, leader of Squad 7 consisting of Hyuga Hinata, Uchiha Sasuke and Uzumaki Naruto, do hereby nominate my team for the Chunin exams. I, Momochi Zabuza, leader of Squad 8 consisting of Aburame Shino, Uzumaki Fu and Yuki Haku, do nominate my team for the Chunin exams. I, Sarutobi Asuma, leader of Squad 10 consisting of Nara Shikamaru, Yamanaka Ino and Akamichi Choji, do hereby nominate my team for the Chunin exams. As soon as Asuma finished, the room exploded into whispers about the Genin teams. Now wait a minute. All three of the teams were my students, and while I admit that they have improved, they are nowhere near ready for the exams. It will destroy them. Iruka shouted protectively. Actually, I think that the Chunin exams are nowhere near ready for them. Zabuza joked, making some Jonin scowl. As soon as they had heard that Zabuza had taken over Squad 8, they had expected this of him but not of Kakashi and Asuma. Iruka, I understand your concern, and while I admit that it is a good thing for you to have for your students, you must understand that they are not your students anymore, and as such you need to have more faith in them. Kakashi chastised. Furthermore, they are soldiers, and our soldiers at that. We have a better understanding of what they are capable of than you do. Kakashi. Iruka shouted in shock, not expecting that from the Jonin that stressed teamwork above all else. Enough. Do you truly feel that the team is ready? My team Sandame-sama has already completed an S-rank mission. I am more than confident in their abilities. Kakashi said without hesitation, making many Jonin sputter. Genin completing an S-rank mission was impossible. Very well. I have seen the results of your training with them, and I must admit that I was quite shocked when you told me that they had defeated those three. Continue. I, Might Guy, leader of Squad 9 consisting of Rock Lee, Ten and Hyuga Neji, do hereby nominate my team for the Chunin exams. The rest of the meeting went off without a hitch, and soon everyone was filing out of the room. Iruka was quiet and somewhat sullen. He knew that the Chunin exams had a high mortality rate, and to top it off, they had ended many careers of Genin not ready for the stress. How could Kakashi be so irresponsible? He thought. You are more than welcome to join us for a training session if you want to see that I am not endangering them unnecessarily. Kakashi said from behind him. I know that you care for Naruto more than the others. Trust me, I would have not entered them if I didn't feel that they were ready. In all actuality, I would have preferred to enter them solo or into the Jonin exams, but that wouldn't have been allowed. Iruka glared at Kakashi but followed him anyway to the training field where Team 7 was meditating. I thought that I said you were on vacation. He joked, making the Genin look up. We haven't done any heavy training or missions. Naruto pointed out, making Iruka groan. Well, in that case you wouldn't mind a mild sparring session to keep your skills up. All three Genin were on their feet in an instant and into their individual stances. That seems a bit different, Hinata. The days preceding the Chunin exams were for the most part calm and relaxing. Especially to the exhausted Genin. They hadn't realized just how much they had been worked into the ground and how tense they were until they had been given the time to relax. Needless to say, they enjoyed it. The morning of the exam, the Konoha 12 met early in front of the academy. They had agreed to enter early so that they could get a better assessment on the other examinees. Last time they had gone in blind, and some of them had almost lost their life as a result. This time they wanted to be as prepared as they could be. Entering the building, they made their way to the classroom, completely ignoring the genjutsu and the chunin underneath it. Earning a nod of approval from their Jonin, they entered and took places near but not next to each other. Then they played the waiting game. By the time that the last of the competitors trickled in, Naruto had dozed off on his desk and Sasuke was trying in vain to wake him without drawing attention to themselves. Needless to say that it wasn't working. Sighing, he sat back in his chair and waited, absent-mindedly rubbing the concealed seal on his arm. Naruto had finished it the night before, and in all honesty it had hurt when it was applied. Not as much as the evil sealing method that Kakashi used the first time around, but it still hurt. Spotting a flash of silver, Sasuke couldn't help but snicker. They had placed themselves in such a way that the spy for Orochimaru, Kabuto, couldn't get close and offer information without drawing attention to himself. Furthermore, as they weren't making a racket this time, he had no reason to approach him. Naruto and Sasuke had both agreed that they would most likely hit the boy if he approached them, which is why they chose the placement that they did. He was thankful that they had thought of that beforehand instead of trying to control themselves when it happened. Leaning back in his chair, he closed his eyes and stretched his senses. He never liked to put them too far, but he also didn't want to make himself vulnerable either. Picking up the examiners in the room next to theirs, he smirked. They were waiting for some kind of ruckus to walk into. Unfortunately, unless another team started it, then they would be waiting a while. Seems like they got tired of waiting, Sasuke thought to himself several minutes later, just as the examiners entered the room. Alright maggots, listen up, because I will not repeat myself. My name is Morino Ibiki and I will be your first examiner for these exams. I want everyone to line up and hand in your applications one at a time and receive your assigned seat while you are at it. No talking. If you haven't turned in your applications in the next 10 minutes, you are disqualified. Do I make myself clear? The reaction was almost instantaneous as the genin jumped up and made their way to the front of the room to do as they were told. Sasuke turned to shake Naruto one last time, only to see him halfway to the front of the room. How does he do that? He thought, following the Rokudime. It didn't take long for everyone to be seated, and Sasuke found himself holding back a laugh as he noticed the whole team had received their original seats. Glancing back to the front, he saw Ibiki smirking at the naive genin. Alright then, pay attention. The test consists of 10 questions. The last question will be asked 15 minutes before time is up, and you will only have 1 hour. We will not be answering any questions. Each genin will start with a perfect score. You will have points deducted for each wrong answer. If you are caught cheating, you will have points deducted from your score, and if you are caught 3 times, you and your team will be disqualified from the exam. If you receive a 0, you fail the exam. If anyone on your team receives a 0, the entire team fails. Now then, any questions? As a hand raised in the back, the examiner's sweat dropped at the stupidity. After removing the genin and his team, Ibiki looked around and nodded. Begin. With the jonin. Sure is quiet without the genin, isn't it? Asuma said, stretching out. Kakashi chuckled and glanced at the man. It's quiet even with them when they are training. A chuckle escaped the jonin's lips as he looked at the ceiling. Morino Ibiki, huh? Too bad that the kids won't be fazed by him. Do you think that he will yell at us later for making them immune to psychological warfare? Probably. Kakashi replied, turning a page in his book. Ibiki isn't the lead expert in T&I here in Konoha. Zabuza asked, sitting next to the two. Yup. Too bad that the kids aren't that easily scarred anymore. 45 minutes later. Pencils down. It is time for the last question. However, before we begin, there are a few more rules that we need to go over. First, you may choose to take the question. If you choose not to answer the question, then you will receive an automatic 0 and you fail. Well, of course we are going to take it then. A blonde yelled from the crowd. However, if you take the question and get it wrong, then you and your team will fail and be banned from the exams forever. Angry shouts of disbelief rang out, and Ibiki couldn't help but smirk inwardly. Those are the rules this year, deal with it. If you wish to refuse the question, raise your hands now. Hand after hand began to raise as the genin dropped out, refusing to be stuck at the lowest tier forever. However, Ibiki noticed that a group of 12 seemed completely unaffected as they stared at him confidently. Raising an eyebrow, his eyes landed on the Hyuga heiress and the village pariah. Kakashi performed a miracle on these two, didn't he? You seem confident in your ability to pass this question. Are you sure that you can make it? I'm a ninja, I don't have a choice in the matter. I don't get to choose my missions just like I don't get to choose how much intel I get before accepting the mission. If the intel is wrong, I can't just refuse to finish the mission because it is harder than I was told. So your scare tactics don't work on me. Naruto replied calmly. What about you, Miss Hyuga? I'm not scared. I, too, wear the headband of the hidden leaf. As the future matriarch of the Hyuga clan, I will have to make decisions like this all the time, and if I spend my time worrying over which decision I make and if it is the right one, then the clan may fall before I have a chance to save them. Hinata countered. Ibiki nodded and looked around at the room that had emptied significantly. Glancing at the proctors, they all nodded and Ibiki returned to the front of the room. Very well then. Everyone that stayed has passed the first exam of the Chunin exams. Congratulations. What about the 10th question? That was the 10th question. Naruto replied quietly, making everyone's eyes widened. It had indeed been a question. They just never thought that it would be the question. So then the rest of this was pointless. A Sand Kunoichi yelled. That was to test your information gathering skills. You may not get all the intel on a mission, just as you may not get any intel. You will have to gather the information necessary to make an informed decision when you lead your teams as a Chunin. As Blondie said, Chunin don't get the choice to refuse a mission just because they got wrong or no intelligence. They have to adapt and get the information themselves. Then use that information to lead their team to a successful mission with the least amount of injuries or casualties. So they weren't useless. This part of the exam tested your information gathering, ability to analyze the situation, and willingness to lead your team despite the odds. Therefore, everyone in here has passed the first RO. A black blur shot through the window, shattering it in the process. Anko, you are early, again. Anko merely laughed sheepishly and looked around. There are still a lot of Gen and Ibiki. Are you going soft? No. We just have a good crop this year. Well, that won't matter because when I am done, then their numbers will be cut in half. Everyone follow me, I'm the second proctor of the Chunin exams. As the teens shuffled out of the room, Ibiki shook his head and glanced over to where the blonde had been sitting. He had been certain that the kid hadn't even picked up his pencil once, and yet the test was filled out perfectly in extremely neat handwriting. Just how did you perform that miracle, Kakashi? Alright everyone, welcome to Training Ground 44, also known as the Forest of Death. This is where the second phase of the exam will take place. Each team will receive either a Heaven or Earth scroll before entering, and your task will be to retrieve the opposite scroll and head to the tower in the center of the forest in 5 days. You will only pass the exams if you have both scrolls and all of your teammates alive when you enter. In order to get the other scroll, you must take them from another team, and everything is allowed. Evening. 5 days. One of the genin yelled out, and Anko smirked sadistically. Yes. Furthermore, regardless of whether or not you pass or fail, you will spend all 5 days in the forest. Someone will come to get you when the second round is over, if we remember. Now, before I send you all off to your deaths, I need you to sign these forms which release Konoha and its nin of any responsibility for your deaths should they occur in the exam. Wouldn't want to start a war over this now, would we? Anyway, when your team has signed them, have a representative of the team bring them over there and turn them in for your scroll. The exam will begin in 1 hour. The longest hour of our lives. Ino whispered to her team. Even though they had done immense training for this, she was still concerned about this round. After all, if what Sasuke and Naruto said was true, then they were going to be attacked by a Sannin in there. Perhaps. Shikamaru replied. The hour passed quickly. Almost too quickly for some of the genin, and before they knew it, they were all standing in front of one of the gates. Sasuke took a deep breath and nodded to Naruto, who returned it. As soon as the gates opened and the timer started, they disappeared from sight, flying through the forest. They had developed a game plan for this. The first step was to ambush another team and get the scroll they needed as fast as possible. From there, they were going to hide both scrolls and gather another set that, if things went exactly like last time, would be destroyed by Orochimaru. As soon as Orochimaru had left the vicinity, Sasuke would drop the act and make their way to the tower as fast as possible. They wanted to have as much time as possible to prepare their strategy for the next round. Finding the scrolls that they needed was easier than they thought. It was that fact alone that made them realize just how underprepared they had been the first time around. Slowing their pace at the same place that they were attacked, Naruto motioned for Hinata to brace herself as they were almost instantly assailed by a massive wind jutsu. Like the last time, Naruto allowed himself to be carried away by the wind. Landing on his feet, he quickly sidestepped the snake that lunged at him and drew a sword from inside one of his many storage seals. Funneling his wind chakra, he quickly severed the snake's head and then spun as he heard clapping. Here we thought that you were the weakest of your class. Oh well, this should be fun. One of Orochimaru's men said as they lunged at the blonde. This didn't happen last time. Or was it supposed to if I had managed to escape the snake and not get eaten? Naruto thought to himself. He was worried that too much of his skill would be revealed and just how much had been changed. Last time he had fought Kiba and just barely won thanks to the five-pronged seal. Ino had been knocked out of the tournament in a tie with Sakura, but that would not happen now. Sakura wasn't even in the exams and Ino had actually been trained. Coming back to the fight, he sighed as he realized that his body had been on autopilot the entire time. Cleaning his blade, he sealed it and headed in the direction that he knew Sasuke would be in. Sasuke, on the other hand, was growling. It was getting harder and harder to keep from deviating from the way that the fight went last time, with a few key differences. This time he didn't freak out and he kept his wit about him. Plus, he was fighting a little more strategically. However, the urge to just the snake and be done with it was almost too much. Thankfully, he didn't have to fight the urge for too much longer as Orochimaru decided to stop playing games. Very good, Sasuke. You are indeed strong, and to think that you already have a fully matured Sharingan as well. You may just be as good as Itachi after all. I think that I shall leave you with a present. Just shut up and get it over with already. Sasuke groaned mentally. He never realized just how much Orochimaru liked to talk. Just as Sasuke felt Orochimaru's fangs pierce his skin, his thoughts went back to the way that the exam played out the first time. Karen. I forgot about her. We'll have to leave a clone behind to save her before we enter the tower. He thought as Orochimaru pulled back and Naruto dropped next to him. What did you do to the Tem? Naruto demanded, making Sasuke groan. Falling into the act of the seal-taking route, he actually had to force himself to start blacking out. Thankfully, the snake Sannin left before he actually had to. He's gone, Sasuke. Shall we? Someone needs to leave a clone behind. Do you remember Karen? Yeah. After I came to the first time around and we were struggling to find another scroll, I saved her life from a bear. If someone doesn't intervene, she will die this time. Okay. About where in the forest did you run into her? After getting the location, Naruto sent a transformed shadow clone to look for the red head, and then they ran for the tower at top speed. Due to their training, it didn't take long for them to arrive. Opening the scrolls, they laughed at Iruka's face. The poor Chunin had yet to recover from their mild sparring session a few days ago. Hello. Tell the old man that Orochimaru is in the forest. I ran into one of his snakes. Naruto chirped as soon as they got the go-ahead to leave. Iruka shook his head and ran off to talk to the Hokage. Now what, Dobi? Now we wait for the summons to talk to the old bastard. But what do we tell him about the seal? There is a seal that I found in the clan scrolls we retrieved from Gato's place that is isolating the seal and its effects, making you immune, or something like that. You are an idiot sometimes. Up yours. The summons from the Hokage didn't take too long, and when they arrived they found a rather bruised Anko in the room. Did you truly run into Orochimaru? I ran into one of his snake summons and I got a glance of him before he ran off to God knows where. Naruto chirped, making the Sandaime groan. What about the two of you? You mean the man that gave me this hickey? Sasuke said as obliviously as he could, showing the cursed seal. Yes. Then yes, I ran into the pedophile. I doubt that Orochimaru is a pedophile in addition to being a traitor. Hiruzen said, trailing off at the end due to the expressions on the genin's face. Anyo. He did stalk a 13-year-old boy in a dark forest and force himself on him, even if it was just his teeth, and he left a hickey behind. I think that would qualify, right? Hinata squeaked, making the room freeze. Well, when you put it that way. Anko said, trailing off, turning a little pale at all the things that she didn't remember. Be that as it may, we need to seal that mark immediately. Why? Because Sasuke Orochimaru can influence you with it, and we really don't want that to happen. Plus, I cannot allow you to use its power. Really. It's just that outside of the initial sting of the bite, there hasn't been any pain or anything. I think that he messed up or something. Hiruzen's eyes nearly came out of his head as he looked at the boy in front of him. Did Itachi do something to protect him from Orochimaru that night? Or is it something else entirely? I wonder if it has anything to do with their change in behavior. Just to be on the safe side. Kakashi, do the sealing. Yes, sir. Come along, Sasuke. Nodding to his Jonin, Sasuke left the room and Naruto looked at the Hokage and tilted his head. Can Hinata and I leave now? I don't want you to tell anyone what happened in the forest, alright? Yes, sir. Hokage-sama. They chorused before being dismissed. Shaking his head, Hiruzen looked out the window in deep thought. Just what is going on anymore? The remaining days flew by quickly for the genin as each team began to trickle into the hall. Naruto nodded at the familiar faces and continued to explore. Sasuke and him had decided that they would only use what was necessary for them to win their matches. Unless they went against one of Orochimaru's men from Sound. They would have gladly dealt with Kabuto and his team right away, but they didn't want to draw too much attention to themselves, and Konoha Nin would do just that. As the genin gathered in the arena at the end of the exams, Naruto tuned out the speech that the Sandaime was giving. Now then, if there is anyone that wishes to forfeit, do so now. Like the last time, Kabuto dropped out and everyone glanced up at the board in front of them. This was the moment of truth to see just how much things had changed. They prayed that they didn't have too many issues or changes in the matches, as that would make it impossible to determine when the invasion was going to begin. The first match will be Akado Yoroi vs. Uchiha Sasuke. Hayate called out. Naruto nodded mentally as the match was the exact same. The only difference will be in how much damage Sasuke does this time around. He thought to himself. As Hayate waited for the last of the competitors to make their way to the balcony, he eyed the two fighters before him. The Hokage had instructed all of the proctors to pay close attention to Team 7 in particular. Why, he had no idea, but as he stared at the Uchiha survivor, he realized that the boy wasn't even concerned by the older genin before him. Nor did he look why. It seemed as if he had already formulated a plan of attack and was just waiting for the moment to strike. Not at all like a genin. More like a seasoned jonin on the front line of a war. He mused. Begin. No sooner than the word left his mouth, Hayate watched as Yoroi slammed into the wall behind him from a devastating punch to the face that he hadn't even seen. Sasuke stood where Yoroi had been, fist still extended. Get up. There is no way that was enough to defeat you. Sasuke growled as Yoroi slowly pulled himself up. Glaring at his target from behind his glasses, Yoroi cursed. If Sasuke was that strong and fast, he wasn't going to be able to hold back, which would blow his cover. However, if he held back, he wouldn't be able to test him like Orochimaru wanted him to do. Unfortunately, he didn't have much time to think as the genin was in front of him once more, and this time he met another wall courtesy of a spin kick to the face. I can't even track him. He practically screamed mentally. The third kick took him by surprise as Sasuke flawlessly performed the shadow dance and launched him into the air. As he did the first time, Sasuke began his Shishiren. The difference this time was the addition of Raiden Chakra to every blow. He's not getting back up, or walking ever again. Sasuke thought as he slammed his foot into the spy's midsection, the ribs giving way under his foot. Landing on his feet, Sasuke turned and headed for the balcony. Winner Uchiha Sasuke. Hayate called out in mild shock. The match had displayed a surprising amount of brutality and no restraint despite fighting another Leaf Nin. Furthermore, the Uchiha didn't look concerned at all by his opponent's condition. The speed he displayed was something that Hayate had never thought a genin could accomplish, and to top it all off, the match had been a mere 30 seconds. As Sasuke reached the balcony, he received a high five from his friend and leaned on the railing to wait. Next match will be Tsuchi-kin vs. Nara Shikamaru. As the two took their positions, Shikamaru sighed. Begin. Jumping away from his opponent, Shikamaru drew a handful of kunai and launched them around the ring. Ignoring Kin's mocking about his aim, he quickly extended his shadows and caught the girl before she knew what had happened. Walking her towards one of his kunai, he reached down and grabbed an imaginary weapon. Unfortunately for Kin, she grabbed a real one. Placing it to his throat, he looked at Hayate. Call the match. Otherwise I will have no choice but to end her life. He drawled out. Kin's eyes widened as she realized the position she was in. All he had to do was thrust his imaginary kunai further and she would bury the sharp object in her throat, ending her own life. Winner Nara Shikamaru. Hayate called in shock of having witnessed another half-a-minute match. Releasing the kunoichi, Shikamaru collected his kunai and headed for the balcony without a word. Looking back at the board, Hayate nodded slightly. Next match, Abumi Zaku vs. Aburame Shino. The fighters arrived quickly and with a quick nod he started the match. Once again the match was quick, with Shino surrounding his opponent and forcing his hand. Then promptly blowing them off as Zaku refused to quit and used plugged wind tunnels. Hayate sighed. The new genin were making the older shinobi question what they had been doing during their genin days while displaying next to nothing of their skills. Up in the balcony, Naruto was nodding to himself. So far the matches had been the same, however, that was about to change and he knew it. Without Sakura or Kiba there was no way that the matches could remain the same. He was proved right when the next match was declared. Hyuga Hinata vs. Tsurugi Masumi. As the competitors made their way down, Naruto had a raised eyebrow. Masumi won't be fighting Kankuro. Interesting. How will you deal with this, Haim? Begin. Like before, Masumi wasted no time wrapping around his opponent. However, unlike before, his opponent didn't have a puppet to switch with. Give up or I'll break your neck. I see. Hinata replied, her Byakugans having activated as soon as Hayate had given the go-ahead. You send chakra through your limbs to disconnect your joints, allowing you to move in any way you desire and use your whole body as a means of restraining your opponent. Unfortunately, you seem to forget what the Hyuga clan's taijutsu can do. I know what it does. However, you can't use your hands to shut off my tenketsu. Admit it, you can't win. What kind of ninja do you take me for? Masumi raised an eyebrow, but before he could ask, it felt as if his whole body had lit itself on fire. Releasing the kunoichi, he fell to the ground as his technique failed to reverse itself. It was then that he noticed he was on fire. A Hyuga is considered an expert in chakra because they are not limited to the number of tenketsu that they can consciously release chakra from. The medics may be able to reconnect your joints, but they will never be able to repair the tenketsu I destroyed. She whispered as she turned to leave. As soon as Hayate called the match, the medics rushed forward and quickly doused the flames, carrying Masumi off to be treated as fast as possible. Naruto smiled and nodded to Hinata, who blushed faintly before leaning against her, unbeknown to her, future husband. Hiruzen eyed the heiress closely. He had never heard of a fire-based Hyuga attack. In fact, the clan was so set on tradition that they refused to deviate from the chakra-based taijutsu style at all. Innovative techniques and changes to the style were discouraged and sometimes even punished. Yet, Hinata had just used an elemental version of the Jukin, which begged the question, did the clan even know about it? Sabaku no Kankuro vs. Uzumaki Fu. Naruto snorted and shook his head at the match. Focusing on his friend, he laughed. I guess Kankuro won't be in the finals this time. I wonder how that will change things. Good point. Maybe Shino will get his match this time. Idiot. Cutting the link, the two refocused on the match before them. Kankuro on the other hand was mentally ranting at how unfair his match was going to be when Fu sprinted at him. He allowed the attack to make contact and then immediately regretted it as he was forced to leave his hiding place when the puppet practically exploded underneath her fist, raining a shower of wood, poisoned weapons and fabric. Staring at the girl in shock, he began to contemplate his options. Surprised, Fu giggled and then launched at him. Barely escaping her blow, he watched in horror as the ground, like his puppet, exploded from her attack. Completely ignoring the orders he had been given, he looked at the proctor who, like himself, was staring in horror at his strength she had. I forfeit. I doubt there is anyone that can fight against that kind of strength. Fu stopped mid-charge and outwardly pouted, all the while she was laughing with Chome over the expressions she was getting from everyone. Winner Uzumaki Fu. Kankuro retreated quickly mournfully after gathering the remains of his puppet. The screen flashed one more, drawing the attention of everyone in the room. Sabaku no Tamari vs. Rock Lee. Naruto was beginning to worry. If Lee was fighting Tamari, then did that mean Tenten would fight Gaara? If not, then who? He was afraid that another of his friends would be injured and he wasn't sure if he could allow that. Begin. Tamari was about to move when an attack that she couldn't even see slammed into her midsection and launched her across the room and into a wall. Unfortunately, for the San Kunoichi, she lost consciousness immediately. Sweat dropping at the boy, Hayate cleared his throat. Winner Rock Lee. Naruto shook his head sadly. None of the Suna nins had anywhere near the amount of speed to challenge Lee. The only reason that Lee lost the first time was because of Gaara's sand armor, Shukaku, and his own recklessness. Tenten vs. Karui. Karui. Did her team participate the first time? Naruto asked himself in shock. Looking over the participants once more, he cursed at not noticing the difference. How could he have missed their presence in the village? Next to him, Sasuke seemed to be having the same thoughts. How had he missed the Kumo Kunoichi's presence? Begin. As Karui unsheathed her sword, Tenten grinned and unsealed one of her own, making the redhead glare. Do you really think that you can beat me in Kenjutsu? You sure are. Why? Konoha isn't very well known for sword play, you know. That may be so, but I will never know how I stand up to swordsmen from other countries if I don't try. Tenten replied and then raced forward, her speed startling the Kumo nin. Barely managing to block, she shook her shock off and began to try to end the fight quickly. However, she quickly found out the girl before her was no pushover. Despite being from a village that placed emphasis on their bloodlines in ninjutsu, she seemed more than just proficient at using the blade she held. Karui clenched her teeth and met Tenten blow for blow. Tenten on the other hand was carefully watching the kunoichi and looking for weaknesses. It was then that she realized that the longer she matched the girl, the more angry she became and the sloppier her attacks became. Nodding to herself as she formulated a plan, she began to take advantage of the openings being left by her opponent. As Karui slowly, but surely, began to lose the match, she felt the irritation she was feeling grow. How could a Konoha nin match her in Kenjutsu? It was then that she felt the weight of her sword leave her hand and she cursed. Not bad for a Konoha nin. She growled. Having lost her sword, the only option left available was taijutsu. She had never thought that she would be bested in Kenjutsu and as a result put off learning any ninjutsu. Unfortunately, for her, Tenten was trained by a taijutsu master. The taijutsu fight lasted only a few moments before she was bested and pinned. Winner Tenten. Standing, Tenten held out her hand for the Kumo nin to help her up. That was a good fight. The only problem was that you angered too quickly and focused solely on your Kenjutsu. She said, smiling. What would you know? I used to be just like you. I focused so much on my Bukijutsu that any futon user would have been able to beat me. Then I wound up in a joint training session with some other teams thanks to my idiot sensei, and I realized just how weak I was compared to them by only focusing on the one thing I had a natural talent for. So I started to work on the other aspects of the ninja life and have gotten so much stronger because of it. She replied as Karui stared in shock. Shaking her head, she ignored Tenten's hand and picked up her sword. Silently she made her way back to her team contemplating the girl's words. Next match will be Hyuga Neji vs. Omoi. The match made almost everyone tense in nervousness. It was no secret that there was no love between Kumo and the Hyuga clan after the kidnapping debacle 9 years prior. So no one had any clue as to what would happen now. Especially for those well aware of Neji's anger over his father's death. Omoi on the other hand seemed oblivious to his teammates. Oh man, this is the worst matchup I could have gotten. If I hurt Neji, then the Hyuga clan will be angry and may even go after Kumo, which will make Raikage-sama angry despite the fact that he agreed to the fact that someone may get hurt in the exams, and then he'll declare war on Konoha, and that will start the Fourth Shinobi War and all of the countries will get involved, which will end up getting Kumo destroyed, and in the end it will be all my fault. Neji's sweat dropped at the nin and cleared his throat. Are you done thinking of the worst case scenario for an expected outcome in a fight between ninja? Neji said and activated his Byakugans. Besides, this is a fight to determine who will continue in the exam, the clan has nothing to do with this. Shaking his head, Omoi reached for his sword and waited for the start signal. As soon as they received the go-ahead, Neji shot forward once again, catching a Kumo nin off guard with unexpected levels of speed and landed a palm strike to Omoi's midsection, launching him a few feet back. Not stopping his momentum, Neji quickly sealed all of the tenketsu in Omoi's arms and legs, rendering him helpless and unable to continue the match. Winner Hyuga Neji. You only lost because you were too focused on the what-ifs and not your opponent and surroundings. If we all lived in fear of the what-ifs, then nothing would ever get done and the world would never make advancements. The same thing will happen to you as a ninja if you don't change. Neji bit out coldly and headed back to his team, making everyone release a sigh of relief they weren't aware that they were holding. Next match, Hayate called out as soon as Omoi was off of the floor, will be Samui vs. Kinyuta Dosu. Despite the performance given by the two members of her team, Samui looked unperturbed as she made her way down. Eyeing the man closely, she allowed her gaze to linger on the device attached to his arm. To her it didn't look natural, nor as if it were a protective gauntlet. Most likely the source of his attacks. Futon or sound-based, most likely. Close combat fighter. I'll only have one chance to disable that device before I am caught in the jutsu. She thought to herself. Begin. Watching her opponent closely, she drew her tanto and waited for him to move. As he drew his sleeve up and then charged, Samui felt that her analysis of his fighting style was correct and dropped under his attack, quickly bringing her tanto up and severing his arm from his body. The followed it up with a quick decapitation. As she stood, she swayed but managed to regain her balance. Sound-based attack generated by the gauntlets, which targets the victim's eardrums, affecting their balance and perception. A ninjutsu genjutsu hybrid, if you ask me. Not cool, she said, cleaning her blade and walking away from the corpse. Winner Samui. Next match, Yamanaka Ino vs. Akamichi Choji. Ino and Choji felt their eyes widen at the matchup. They had never anticipated that they would be pitted against each other. Making their way to the floor, they were blissfully unaware of Naruto's inward struggle. Gaara, Haku and myself are left. If I fight Gaara now, then things may get out of hand and he may release Shukaku early. Or I may have to show more of my skills than I am ready to show. If Haku faces Gaara, the same thing will happen. Could she defeat him? The only Jinchuriki she ever faced was me, and I couldn't release the 9 tails back then. He thought, his pulse picking up. Begin. Unlike the other matches, neither combatant moved when the signal was given. Instead, they stared each other down, trying to figure how to go about the fight without displaying too much of their abilities. Gritting her teeth, Ino drew a handful of Senbon and raced forward. As Choji made to punch her, she jumped back and launched the Senbon quickly while his arm was still obscuring his vision. Landing on the ground, she began weaving hand seals quickly. She knew her clan's techniques were of no use to her against Choji. So she resorted to some of the other techniques she had learned. Meanwhile, Choji was having an internal struggle of his own. Pulling the last of the Senbon out, he glanced at Ino and cursed as the last of her seals was made. Quickly activating both the Baika no Jutsu and the Nikuden Sensha, he began spinning and heading towards Ino. He could only hope that she moved out of the way. Unfortunately, Ino had other plans. Waiting until Choji was almost on top of her, she slammed her hands against the ground and released her jutsu. Doden. Renga no Jutsu. A wall of earth rose from the ground quickly right underneath the Akamichi, who was unable to see it, and launched him high in the air. While Choji was in the air, Ino released a hail of kunai with ninja wire attached to form a net. That won't work, he's moving too fast and is too heavy for the wire to hold. Karui snorted. As Choji fell and hit the net, several of the kunai were pulled from the ground, weakening the net. Despite this, it still held and bounced the Akamichi into the air once more. Despite this, he came back down onto the arena floor and continued on his path. Only this time he struck the crater formed during Fu's fight, and he lost control of his momentum, slamming into a wall. As he pulled himself away, he looked over at Ino, who looked rather proud of herself. Nice dodge, Ino, he complimented, making her smile wider. Thanks, but this is still my win, Choji. What do you mean? The Akamichi trailed off as his eyes rolled and he slammed into the ground unconscious. Ino shook her head. You would think that after years of being friends he would remember that I live in a flower shop. Omoi felt his eyes widen as the confusion cleared. Poison. She had a tranquilizer on those Senbon. She was merely biding her time until it kicked in. He whispered in awe. Even Karui had to admit that it was a rather genius way to combat the Akamichi clan. Winner Yamanaka Ino. The final match will be between Momochi Yuki Haku and Uzumaki Naruto. Due to the uneven number of combatants, Sabaku no Gara will receive a pass to the next round. Almost immediately the gathered ninja heard Haku yell out. I have no hope at the moment of defeating Naruto, so I forfeit. Even the Sandame felt his eyes widen in shock. The girl had forfeited against the one genin that everyone wanted to see fight. Furthermore, it was no secret that she had been trained by Zabuza himself and was considered by the former Kiri nin to be stronger than him. That was implying that Naruto, the village prankster, was stronger than an A-ranked nuke nin. Very well. Winner by forfeit Uzumaki Naruto. If I could have all of the finalists make their way down to the arena, we will complete this phase of the exams. We want everyone to select a number from this box and inform us of what it is. Hayate said as Anko came around with a box that had small slips of paper in it. One by one the genin read off their numbers. One by one the numbers were read out, and by the time the last number was selected, the Hokage turned and looked at the genin. I was hoping to work with some experimental jutsu that I have been thinking about and to try and gain some control over the Nine Tails chakra. Neither of which, I believe, would be a very safe thing to do in the Hidden Leaf. It may actually cause alarm among the visiting shinobi if they sense Biju chakra so close to the village. Naruto explained as if he was giving a mission report. Hiruzen leaned back and looked at the boy before him. He still wasn't certain about his changes, and he had been taking a lot of risks in letting him out of his sight as much as he already had. At the same time, he had a very good point about the techniques he wanted to work on. However, was it safe to let him go outside of the village once more when his loyalties were still being questioned? Sighing, he felt his eyes widen as he thought about a solution. There is a former student of mine in Konoha. If you can convince him to escort you, then I will allow the trip. If you can't, then I will deny it. You will have until this time tomorrow. He will be able to defuse the situation if you lose control of the Nine Tails. I wonder if that would go as well as last time. Naruto thought to himself, knowing precisely what the Sandame had in mind. At the same time, he wasn't sure if he was ready to face the Toad Sannin yet. Jiraiya's death had been hard on him, and yet it was quite apparent even before his death that Naruto realized just how little the Sannin had trained him. When he started training with B, that he realized just how far behind he was compared to the other Jinchuriki, let alone his peers. After all, in a 2.5-year span he had only polished his taijutsu, learned how to dispel genjutsu even though he was still bad at it, gained some control over Kurama's chakra, and learned more about the Sannin's writing style than he had hoped. In that same time, Sasuke and Sakura had learned how to hold their own against and even surpass their teachers. While he loved the Sannin like a grandfather, he had been given no choice but to accept that Jiraiya had placed him at a great disadvantage when he struggled to reach the level that he had needed during the Fifth War. Especially when he tried to fight without the use of Senjutsu and Kurama's chakra. He was nothing more than a sitting duck at the time. They were the only things outside of the Rasengan and its variations that made him even remotely dangerous at the time. In all honesty, in the small amount of time that he had spent with Beyond That Turtle, he had learned more than he had in almost all of his time as a ninja of Konoha. Sad really. Naruto had been so lost in thought over the subject he had missed when he agreed to the proposal and left the Sandame's office heading straight for the hot springs. After all, the best place to find Jiraiya would be where he could do his research. That was another thing that pissed Naruto off about Jiraiya. Most of the time that they were training, if they were anywhere near civilization, Jiraiya would be spying on women and not paying attention. It was almost as if his hormones were far more important than his godson. Before his thoughts could go any farther, Naruto was snapped back into reality to hear perverted giggling. Hey old man, you know that the kunoichi in there are going to you when they find out that you are spying on them and corrupting the youth of the village, right? Naruto called out loud enough for the hot springs to hear. Jiraiya paled, and before he could escape he found himself being pelted by kunai of all things. Just where did they hide those in their towels anyway? Fleeing from the scene, desperately running for his life as the kunoichi followed, he looked back and Naruto could be seen laughing on the ground. I'll get even with that kid if it's the last thing that I do, he vowed, his panic making him miss the fact that it had been his own godson that had given him away. Naruto himself couldn't help but pale a little and stop laughing as the rest of the women finally left the hot springs fully dressed and apparently armed to the teeth. Among them was Karui, Samui and Anko wearing expressions that promised a very painful death. Naruto merely pointed in the direction that Jiraiya had headed after answering their questions on whether or not he knew who had been spying on them. I can't help but pity the man now. On second thought, no, I don't. He deserves it for spying on mom and dad on their wedding night. Besides, Hinata could have been in there. Naruto didn't see hide nor hair of Jiraiya for hours afterwards, and it was only as he had decided to head back to Sasuke's for the evening that he caught a glimpse of the Sannin. Jogging in his direction, Naruto smirked as he realized that the man was preoccupied with ogling yet another girl. As he got closer to the two, he felt his old prankster side resurfacing and he transformed into a nondescript, easily forgettable kid and headed into sight. Oji-san, there you are. I have been looking all over for you ever since you left me at the park. Oba-san's not gonna be happy to find out that you have been flirting again, either. I'm hungry and I wanna go home, and I can't do that because you have the house keys. Naruto whined. Jiraiya paled as the girl he had been flirting with got a disgusted look and then slapped him across the face, storming away. Growling, Jiraiya turned to face the menace only to be met with the icy stare of his godson. We need to talk about some things, Godfather, Naruto hissed out in a low tone, making whatever color Jiraiya still have leave the man's face. Grabbing a hold of the man's arm before he could flee or protest, Naruto used the Shunshin to teleport them away from the area and onto an empty training ground. By the time that Jiraiya recovered from the unexpected trip, Naruto had already placed security seals around the area. Now then, shall we start? Now hold on just a minute, kid. You damn well know my name, Jiraiya. After all, mom and dad practically asked your permission to name me after the main character in your only decent book. Naruto countered, making Jiraiya narrow his eyes. Who told you? Does it matter? After all, it's not like you were going to. As a matter of fact, no one ever tells me anything. Well, except for him. I have had one honest person in my life when it comes to my past and the circumstances surrounding the attack 12 years ago. Just one in a whole village of people. Who? The Kyuubi? Who else is going to tell the fox brat anything? Naruto countered angrily. The old Sanin flinched at the venomous tone that was directed at both him and the village. Jesus Christ, the nine tails. Why are you listening to that beast? Why shouldn't I? As I said, and when you were apparently not listening because he is the only one that has ever been honest with me. Naruto snapped. Turning and starting to pace, Jiraiya let out a loud string of curses as he tried to come up with a solution. If you even suggest or try to tighten the seal any, so help me, I will cut you out of my life completely. Now I have to ask you something. Are you or are you not going to at the very least accept your responsibility as my godfather and escort me to my chosen training field to train for the next round of the exams or not? Where do you want to go? I want to go back to Uzu. Unfortunately, the Sandame won't let me go unless you are there because he still thinks that not only could I be a traitor, I can't control the nine tails or defend myself. Since I want to work on more destructive techniques in controlling Kyuubi's chakra, I don't want to do it here in Konoha if I can help it, so I don't cause a panic. However, what I work on will not change regardless of where I am. The only question is whether or not you are going to let the other country's shinobi freak out when they sense the Biju chakra. I see that would be difficult to work on in the village. Jiraiya mumbled. Why is your loyalty being questioned? Because I stopped being the obedient little drone that jumps on command and I finally stopped hiding my true skill. So naturally, I have to be a spy or working for someone else, right? That's ridiculous. That's the ninja world. Naruto shouted, causing the Sannin to recoil as if he had been bitten by a snake. If the person isn't showing unwavering loyalty to their cage, then they are not to be trusted and become disposable. When a Jinchuriki stops being the good little soldier that they are manufactured to be, we are given a death sentence when a more suitable and loyal vessel is found. Can you honestly say, without any doubt, that is not true? Uzu, huh? Jiraiya whispered. After a few moments of awkward silence, he turned to look at his godson once more. When do you want to leave? Tomorrow afternoon. I have a few things I need to do before I can leave. 1 o'clock in the afternoon at, let's say, the West Gate. Deal. I'll go let sensei know. Without a word, Naruto dropped the privacy seals and disappeared, returning to his intended destination. After staring at the spot that Naruto had just been in a few moments earlier, Jiraiya shook his head and headed for the Hokage Tower as fast as he could. He needed answers. With Naruto arriving at Sasuke's house, Naruto opened a closed window and stepped inside the living room. Closing the window once more, he locked it and then dropped on Sasuke's couch. He barely registered the door opening and Sasuke taking his shoes off. He stirred only when Sasuke stopped in front of him. I take it that you ran into Jiraiya today. Did you at least get permission to go to Uzu to train? Yeah, but I have to spend the whole month with Jiraiya looking over my shoulder. I'll manage somehow, but did you and Kakashi get anywhere with your plans for training this coming month? Yeah, he said he would sneak me out of Konoha if he had to so we could work on my more destructive techniques. You should come to Uzu. There is more than enough space to avoid each other there. We might. How do you intend to get anything done with Jiraiya there? I could use a sleep seal and a memory modifier if necessary. However, I think that there should be an Uzumaki-only training ground that I could use to avoid him if necessary. I see. Do you know what Hinata intends to work on over the month? I may have slipped a hint that the Byakugan isn't complete and that it can get stronger. Tricky. Yup. After a few more moments of silence, Sasuke turned to the window and sighed. There are too many changes. We have no idea how the finals are going to go or when the attack will start anymore. With the changes that we have seen now, how much more has become impossible to predict and prevent? I don't know. I have no idea how we didn't notice the change in the passing teams. Or the fact that Kumo had a team in the exams this time. Plus, I still have to get Karen settled, and come to think of it, I may take her to Uzu with me. I'm not sure if you know, but during the war Karen was able to awaken the clan's chakra chains in order to get to you. I'm hoping that we can activate and learn how to control them together. Solid plan. I'm flattered that she would go so far for me. It's just a shame that I will never be able to return her feelings. Don't worry, I will make sure that she never falls for your chakra. Naruto laughed. After a few moments of light-hearted laughter, the two bid each other goodnight and drifted into restless sleep. Meanwhile, with Jiraiya, Sensei, did you know that he was communicating with the Nine Tails? He's what? Hiruzen choked out, almost swallowing his pipe. The kid knows everything about his parents, me being his godfather, and God knows what else. He also said that he trusted Kyuubi more than he trusted the whole village because Kyuubi has been the only one that has been honest with him. Hiruzen glanced over at the portraits on the wall of the former Hokage. How have things gotten this out of control? That's what I want to know. We have to tighten the seal. That is our only choice, Jiraiya. Out of the question at this point, Sensei. He has already made one threat should anyone attempt it. I don't know about you, but I prefer to not be cut out of my godson's life permanently. Some sacrifices have to be made, Jiraiya. That seal needs to be tightened. We cannot allow him to continue conversing with the Nine Tails. It would be far too dangerous, especially with his weird behavior lately. He's been invoking a lot of the Uzu Konoha Treaty lately, and for the most part one have been unable to do anything but watch as he does as he pleases. I wouldn't be surprised if the Nine Tails has talked him into leaving the Hidden Leaf. As it is, he has already expressed an interest in reviving Uzu Shiogakur, or the Uzumaki clan in specific, Sensei. Jiraiya questioned, then groaned. You really messed up, didn't you? Please, Jiraiya, it's not like you were here to take care of him. So the fault is just as much yours. Don't play that game with me, Sensei. You know damn well why I wasn't here. Unless you know someone else that can run my spy network. As the standoff continued, the two glared at one another in silence. I will be escorting Naruto to Uzu for the next month so he can train Sensei. As he said, it's the least that I can do as his godfather. Jiraiya said with a tone of finality. Turning and leaving the room, the only that could be heard was the door closing. Hiruzen sunk in his chair, feeling almost 20 years older. Glancing towards the portraits once more, he sighed. What would you do, Sensei? Is it just me that has these problems, or is it just worse than the other countries because the cause of the problems is in Uzumaki? The next day, for Jiraiya and Naruto, the afternoon seemed to come almost in an instant. It was almost in sync that they arrived at the gate together. Only Naruto wasn't alone. Beside him was a red-haired girl with glasses that seemed almost nervous at being there. This is my cousin Karen. She will be joining us for this trip. She is neither a Konoha shinobi nor under Konoha's authority at all. Naruto said with finality, making the Sannin nod in silence. Not another word was spoken as the trio departed from the village. The trip was silent, and it seemed as if they were strangers merely going in the same direction as opposed to a team. For Naruto, he was lost in thought, praying that the scrolls he had left behind for the rookies would be enough for the coming invasion. Yes, they had regained their 4th and 5th war strength, but at the same time, with how many things had changed, he wasn't sure if it would be enough. Karen herself was wondering what Uzu looked like and if there was anything there that could remove the bite marks on her arms. She absolutely detested the reminder of her time in Kusa and prayed that they wouldn't be permanent scars. Glancing to her side, she blushed slightly at her cousin. He had the warmest, most inviting chakra she had ever felt, and it only seemed to grow in strength on a daily basis. The trip to Nami was done in silence, and Naruto preferred it that way. He still wasn't sure what to do about Jiraiya or his relationship. He knew that it could never be what it once was, but then what could it be? Would Jiraiya actually be willing to do what was needed to repair their relationship? Or would he revert to his old ways as soon as he could? The questions that roamed his mind seemed endless and were offering no solution, which only served to create more questions. To Jiraiya, the trip was nerve-wracking. He had no idea what to say to his godson, or if he should say anything. Truthfully, the Sannin was confused and speechless. He hadn't felt like this for a long time, and he hated every moment of it. He had to try to get to know his godson, or he really would have failed at almost everything in his life. The more that he thought about, the more he realized that he had mostly just followed the people around him and had rarely ever done the opposite. Rarely had he tried to establish his own identity, and that scared him. For the first time in his life, he was questioning who he was and if he really wanted to be that person. For Karen, she was marveling at the sights and the lingering chakra she could still pick up in the areas that they passed. She was aware of the tension between the two males in the group, and she didn't want to make anything awkward by asking. Obviously something had happened between them and they needed time to work it out. The confusion she was getting wasn't helping. Once more her thoughts drifted to the marks on her arm and she silently cursed Kusagaker. In a way, she was also angry at her mom for revealing what they were capable of without thinking of the consequences for either of them. "Hey Uzumaki-sama, welcome back." A man called, startling all three out of their thoughts. Naruto smiled and walked over to him. "Kenji, how are things lately?" Naruto asked. "Good. Ever since Gato's trial and execution we have been doing much better, and we owe it all to your team." "Who are your companions?" "This is my godfather Jiraiya and this is Karen Uzumaki," he said happily. Kenji did a double take at the unique group and felt his eyes widen. "Well, all B2 Uzumaki have returned to these lands now. It's good to meet you, Uzumaki Haim," he said with a bright smile. "I was told that Nami had the most direct and fastest route to Uzu, and that almost, if not all, of the experienced fishermen knew how to get there. Is that true?" "Sure is. Nami used to trade with Uzu often, so it was necessary that anyone going that way knew how to get there." "Why? I wanted to go there to train for my matches in the Chunin exams. The only other way that I can think of would take at least 5 more hours, and I can't afford to lose that much time in my training." "That's fine. I'll take you over there myself. How's that sound?" "Thank you, and cut the Uzumaki-sama crap. I'm not one for formalities." "Maybe I will." Groaning, Naruto followed the jovial man and shook his head. They just wouldn't stop with the formalities. A quick hour and a half later and they were on the shores of Uzushiogakure once more. "So when you coming back across?" "In 29 days. "I see. What time I'll come pick you up?" Smiling, Naruto nodded. "How about noon?" "Sounds good. I'll try to get the Ferris call system working again so that you can come across anytime. Though you may have to activate it from this side. All I know for sure is that it works with seals, so I may not be able to do much." "It's fine. I'll take a look at it when I have the chance." Waving as he left, Naruto turned to the ruins and slowly began walking through them once more. The experience was much better the second time around, and he didn't feel his heart breaking. It could be the fact that there weren't any human remains on the ground this time. "So this is Uzushiogakure," Karen whispered. "What's this weird feeling I'm getting? It used to be said that no matter how long the Uzumaki had been away, they would always feel welcomed in Uzu, because it was their home." Jiraiya whispered. "It must be true because you have never been here, right?" "Never. I kind of like the warmth. I know how you feel." Naruto quipped and then stopped in the center of the village and turned to Jiraiya. "I don't know if I can trust you. I don't even know if it is possible to have any kind of relationship with you, but I am willing to give you the benefit of the doubt right now. Especially at the moment. As you are most likely aware by now, Konoha was infiltrated by Orochimaru. What many don't know is that the snake is planning to invade the village in 1 month's time. Even if the village knew, the Sandaime would only inform the bare minimum of people. I need to be stronger, and so does Karen. He is obsessed with bloodlines, and right now we are the only 2 known Uzumaki alive. Karen is the only Uzumaki that should be able to awaken the clan's Kongo Fusa. Since it only ever seems to appear in females. So she is a target for him. As his teammate, you know how he fights and the basics of his thought pattern. You can teach us how to fight him. You have already trained powerful shinobi, there is no reason that you can't get us up to snuff quickly. Especially once Karen has the chakra necessary for the Kage Bunshin. I need to be ready to fight a Jinchuriki in the exams and be able to protect the village and the stadium while doing it. You want to be a part of my life? Then teach me how to survive long enough on my own power and not by borrowing the Nine Tails' power." Naruto bluntly said, making Jiraiya's eyes widen. How do you know all of this? Jinchuriki can sense one another, and it is obvious why Orochimaru's appearance didn't force the exams to be cancelled or even delayed. Orochimaru threatened the village if they were because he wants to destroy Konoha when they have the most to lose if they survive. As for the rest of it, I'll tell you when you have my complete trust. There are those that already know and they agree with me. So what is it going to be? Jiraiya was silent as he thought over everything that he had learned over the last few days and what he knew from the last few years. It didn't take long for him to reach a conclusion as to what he was going to do. Give me a complete list of everything you two know, and from there we will have a spar to see where your current level is. I'll devise a training plan from there. Smiling for the first time at his godfather, Naruto now knew the course he was going to take. With Sasuke and Kakashi, I have to say that Naruto's seal works quite well. Sasuke. Any problems so far? None. Will we be stopping by Uzu at any time? Perhaps. It will depend on whether or not we can lose our tails. It seems Danzo and the Sandaime weren't content with knowing that you were safe. Or you have come under suspicion as well. Meh. All live. Idiot. As for getting rid of them, are they all root or are there some normal Anbu mixed in? Looks like they are all root. Good. Sasuke said, jumping from a tree branch and turning in midair. Chidori Senbon. New variation. Sort of. It still takes a lot out of me though. To think that this used to be easy for me. Sasuke complained as they continued on, the bodies of the root nin falling to the forest floor, each one bearing a Senbon-shaped hole in their head. The rest of the trip went smoothly, and as they settled down for the night, Sasuke stretched out and yawned. Kakashi just smiled and shook his head at the boy's antics. Tell me, Sasuke, was I a good teacher the first time around? Sasuke blinked and tilted his head. Yes and no. What does that mean? You were so focused on repaying your debt to Obito that you forgot about the rest of the team. The only one that really got any training from you in the beginning was me. By the time that I abandoned the village, Naruto and Sakura were so far behind they might as well have just left the academy. I was told that after Naruto returned from a 3-year training trip with that useless Sannin, you did start him on elemental manipulation, but halfway through you left to take care of Asuma's team who were out for revenge for Asuma's death. Yamato finished the training with him, which he was only doing to take the Rasengan to its completed form. Leaning back, Sasuke looked at the sky. Naruto really didn't have much going into the Fourth War. Everyone was so focused on having the Jinchuriki that they forgot about the shinobi that contained the beast. Most of his training was either the Rasengan and Kyuubi's chakra. He himself didn't have any skills he could really use if you took the ability to use both of them away from him. Granted, he had Senjutsu, but that was a liability with how long he had to sit to gather the chakra, and even that put him on a time limit. So in all honesty, overall you weren't a good teacher, but when you did teach, you did it as well as you could. Sasuke finished looking over at the Jonin, who seemed lost in thought, and shook his head. That is why you weren't a good teacher, you know. What? You get so lost in your thoughts of the past that you forget about the present and the future. You start living in the past, and that is what trips you up all the time. This time around you were an awesome teacher. Especially since we didn't give you a choice in the matter but to try. Don't think of the past. Focus on the present. The better you make the present, the more pleasant the future will be. You learned that lesson the hard way, didn't you? The Dobi literally beat it into me. Repeatedly. Ouch. So what do you want to focus on? Well, with a very toned down version of the shadow clone training method that the Dobi uses, I want to focus on improving my taijutsu some more in my reserves. Using my best techniques takes more chakra than I have at the moment, and using them once usually takes me out of the fight even if I don't look like it. I'm going to need every jutsu I have for the invasion and the events that come to pass. I see. Let's also work on expanding your jutsu repertoire. Low-level techniques can be just as deadly when used correctly. From what I have seen, you and Naruto definitely have little in the way of non-village destroying jutsu. Even with the work we have been doing on that. True. We'll start first thing in the morning. Get some sleep, Sasuke. Hinata. Father, may I have a moment of your time? Come in, Hinata. Walking into the room soundlessly, Hinata took a seat in front of her father's desk and took a moment to control her breathing and formulate exactly what she wanted to say. Is it possible that the Byakugan isn't complete? What do you mean? Is it possible for the Byakugan to evolve like the Sharingan? No, I don't believe so. Is that because it has never happened or because the Hyuga refused to be similar to the Uchiha so they never tried? Hiyashi blinked and set the pen down that he had been using. Staring at the girl before him, he studied her intently. Ever since the Uzumaki boy had changed and Hinata began training with him, she had become more and more assertive and even more aggressive in her spars. In reality, she had actually been winning them all. Something that had thrown the clan into an uproar, as they had been certain that Hanabi was going to be named heiress because she was so much more talented at the Juken. Yet, somehow Hinata had not only caught up to her but soared past her. Now no one knew who was going to be named heiress, and the elders had stopped demanding one be marked. He was forever grateful for the last part. What is it you want, Hinata? Knowledge. I want to get into the sealed part of the archives to look at the records of our ancestors to see what they have to say about the Byakugan. Right now everything that we have access to is censored by the elders to prevent anything that could prove our relationship to the Uchiha from being found. I think that the answers that I am looking for are in there. I need you to open the door though. Hiyashi rolled the request over in his mind and contemplated everything that he knew about the clan and the elders. What Hinata said made sense. Their ancestors had done everything in their power to disprove that the Uchiha and Hyuga were related distantly. If the Byakugan was capable of evolution, then that would only prove a closer connection. Furthermore, it would disprove the claim that the Byakugan was complete upon activation, unlike the Sharingan that needed to be trained to reach a state of full maturation. I'll allow it, but only for an hour. If you can't find anything, then you will drop this silly quest. You sound like the elders now, father. Hinata replied calmly, making Hiyashi blink. The pursuit of knowledge and the ability to change to become stronger is how humans have survived for so long. The fact that the clan is trying to prevent that from happening only brings the clan closer to destruction. After all, we are only alive because our ancestors changed the way that they looked at medicine. Hiyashi found himself agreeing with her, and before he knew it, he was standing in front of the door. Remember, only an hour. Nodding, Hinata darted in before he could blink as soon as the seal was released. Once she was out of sight of her father, Hinata made several shadow clones and sent them searching. She knew the general area she had to look in. The clan was predictable like that. The oldest records would be in the back, hidden in a small compartment meant to keep them from being seen. The only challenge was finding the compartment in the hour she had been given. 40 minutes later, Hinata was growing increasingly frustrated. She knew that Naruto wouldn't have lied to her about something like this. Moving another stack of census records, the frown slipped from her face as she caught sight of a hidden door. Opening it, she traveled farther down into the room and gaped as she saw hundreds of scrolls lining the wall. All of them very old, and many of them didn't bear the Hyuga crest but that of another clan. Walking over to the area with the oldest records, he pulled the first scroll and tried to open it, only to find a blood seal in the way. Pricking her finger, she watched as it opened quickly. Adjusting the chakra orb she was using for light, her eyes widened as she read each new sentence, causing the act to continue. By the end of the scroll, she sat on the floor and stared at all of the records around her. There was only one thing that crossed her mind as she thought of the actions her clan had taken over the years and the consequences they refused to see or acknowledge. Fools. They are all fools, she whispered, looking back at the scroll. Hinata, time's up. She heard her father call. Looking around the room, she groaned and then smirked. It was a gamble and a Naruto-like maneuver, but she was willing to risk it. Hiyashi just nodded at Hinata's exit and resealed the room, following after her. He needn't ask if she found anything, as the lack of scrolls on her seemed to be self-explanatory, and disappeared back into his office. Never noticing the small smirk on her face. Running to her room and gathering her training supplies, she called out that she was going for training and left the compound quickly. Darting from road to road, she periodically checked to see if she was being followed by her retainer, and when she was sure that she wasn't, she vaulted over the gate to Training Field 0. Once she had put quite a bit of distance between her and the fence and knew she couldn't be seen by the Byakugans or any of the Anbu patrols, her smile grew wider. A puff of smoke later, and Hinata nodded to her shadow clone before the original disappeared, revealing herself to be a clone as well. After a few seconds, another puff of smoke was seen, and when that cleared, she was holding the scroll she had been looking at. Knowing that there hadn't been nearly enough time to seal the scrolls or look through them for the ones she needed, Hinata had sent a clone up to her father in her place. Since he never considered her to have cloned herself, he thought nothing of it and let it go. It was a gamble because she had no way of knowing whether or not the room was sealed in such a way that she wouldn't be able to replace out of it. Her gamble had worked, and she looked at the object in her other hand. Inside of it was all of the scrolls that she had found in the hidden room. She had made an effort to seal all of them before her clone dispelled, telling her that they were going to do the replacement. Sitting back against a tree, she began to reread the scroll, and as she did, she began to understand why they had sealed all of it away. They were angry and jealous that they hadn't been able to access the knowledge that had been contained in them. According to the scroll, more of a letter, to be honest, everyone that had tried to open it had been deemed unworthy by her clan's founder. However, it had judged her to be worthy, and she refused to waste this opportunity to show the clan that they had been destroying themselves piece by sticking to tradition. Naruto-kun, I'm one step closer to my goal of uniting the clan and getting rid of that accursed seal. Soon I will be able to unite the clan as they should have been, a family. I still don't know what to do about those that refuse to go quietly. However, I know that I will find a way to prove that this change is needed. I won't let anyone stop me, not even my grandfather. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the village, the other rookies were also approaching their training with the same determination. In the Yamanaka household, Ino was quietly working on an exercise that Naruto had suggested. She was attempting to separate her yin and yang chakra to use them separately. He had theorized that no one had developed the Mokuden in the Senju clan because it wasn't a bloodline and more of an innate ability to manipulate his yang chakra to his will. So by that logic, anyone with water, earth and yang should be able to produce the same results. She wasn't having any luck, but she was determined to succeed. If only to prove her father wrong. When she had told him what she was attempting, he had tried to dissuade her, telling her that wasn't how it worked and that Naruto shouldn't have filled her head with such a fairy tale. She, however, knew differently. She knew that it would probably be useless against Fu if she managed, but she was going to try anyway. Besides, no one would expect it, and it would be a good trump to use. Fu already knew about her poisons, and she wasn't dumb enough to use her clan techniques against a Jinchuriki. Besides, she and Fu shared an affinity, and she truly needed something to surprise her with. Glancing to her side, she smirked at the box next to her. The item inside was something that she had wanted to try and had picked it up without anyone knowing about it. Even if she couldn't use the Mokuden, she had one ace. She didn't want to rely on it though. There wasn't nearly enough time to get good enough to use it perfectly. It was a start though. Shikamaru was also trying something new. He knew that the clan's jutsu were easily dispelled with enough light, so he was trying to find a way to make them solid. Almost like manifesting them into a tangible form. One that he could use with or without the light. In addition, he was trying to find a way to combine his fire and earth releases with his clan's shadow jutsu. He knew that his mom was worried about the new attitude towards training and his behavior, but he didn't have time to worry about that. He had an invasion to stop and a world to save. He could watch clouds some other time. Shino was having the most difficulty with his training. He had decided to take one of the clan's weaknesses and turn it into their strength. At the moment, he was working side by side with his clan to breed a fire-resistant Kikaichu. From there, he wanted to try and combine them with his fire, earth and yang release to truly take command of a battle and catch enemies off guard. He believed that had he been able to do so against Hiyari, he would have been more help to Hinata. Glancing to the side, he also reminded himself that he needed to sign the Mantis contract and pass their trial. He wanted to at least ask the summons if they would consider becoming the clan's summons instead of just an individual summons passing from wielder to wielder who may or may not betray them. He felt that the mantises fit with the clan's specialty and felt that there was no harm in trying. Lee was working himself into the ground to increase his limited abilities to the next level. Unlike the other genin, he couldn't work on the elements that they had tested for to make a new trump card because of his inability to use jutsu. He could, however, learn new taijutsu styles and weapons to take them by surprise. He refused to hold the team back because of his inability to use chakra like they could. In all honesty, he needed something that would let him match against ninjutsu specialists as well as genjutsu. Looking down at the object in his hand, he gritted his teeth and channeled what little chakra he could and held his breath. A grin slowly broke across his face and he looked towards Guy, who had tears running down his face. He was one step closer to his goal. Fu was also working on her jutsu mainly because she had never realized how much she relied on Chome until she had been forced to use her own ability. She never wanted to go back to using Chome's power to fight her battles for her. Furthermore, she intended to do her Uzumaki heritage proud as she focused on the strokes she was making on the paper before her. Fuinjutsu wasn't as easy for her as it was for Naruto, but she refused to quit. Putting her brush down, she glanced out the window where her clones were training with either Haku or Zabuza. Haku had wanted to get physically stronger and Fu had promised to help the best she could. By the end of the month she would be that much closer to being Chome's partner and not just her vessel. Neji was panting hard and looking at the lake before him. He knew that Hinata wouldn't restrict herself to a Juken battle and he had to respect that. She was working hard to try and free him from his cage, he could see that now. So he was doing the only thing he could. Training to give her the best fight he could. However, despite having worked on ninjutsu when he was training with Kakashi, he was finding ninjutsu to be much harder than taijutsu. For Hinata, he believed that it was the opposite. Still, he refused to quit. Standing once more, he began to weave the seals for the jutsu he was practicing with renewed vigor. He refused to quit before he managed to prevent his father's grave from being desecrated. Ten was having a meltdown. She had no idea how she was supposed to defeat a Jinchuriki. Just from watching Naruto and Fu train, she knew that she was outclassed in chakra capacity, endurance, stamina, and she couldn't heal half as fast as they could. As she continued to panic, she found herself thinking back to the many discussions she had with Naruto over her future self's abilities, as well as the fights he had as a child. When it clicked, she may not win, but she would be able to do some damage. Especially if he was as reliant on one thing or his Biju like Fu had been when they had started training together. Picking up her gear, she called out to let her dad know that she was leaving and darted off to one of the many training fields. She would pull this off. She didn't have a choice if she wanted to survive. I took each story and found the biggest flaws that were obvious. Wrote them down on paper and then slowly reread the whole story and made notes of what had to be changed in each chapter if I wanted to fix one of the problems I found. From there, I rewrote, removed or changed the wording to be more clear and less confusing. I then fixed any of the grammar and spelling I found during the process. At that point, I stepped away from the chapters that I had to work on for that problem for no less than a whole day. During this time, I would work on a problem in a different problem. When I came back to the first problem I edited, I repeated the process. To put it in perspective, underneath had 23 chapters that needed to be edited and reviewed as it had the most problems. At 2 days per chapter, I needed a minimum of 46 days for the edits on that story alone. Second Chances had 24 chapters that needed edited and, at a minimum of 2 days each, that would take 48 days on its own. I am still doing revisions and editing with my beta on my other story, a Harry Potter and Fullmetal Alchemist crossover. That has 21 chapters that need to be reviewed, and I refuse to add a new chapter and do the revisions after the fact. Another 42 days. I honestly think that for a process that should have taken 136 days for only one pass each, I made pretty good time considering a lot of parts needed 3 to get the wording right. In any event, I am glad that so many of you are still here. First the reviews and then the story. Spectre 117. I didn't have Naruto bring food because of the different things that they had to work on. In Naruto's case, he wanted to try to regain the use of Kurama's chakra and his more destructive jutsu, so he needed a place far away from civilization. He knew that Karen could use the clan's chakra chains and wanted her to be able to access them. However, he also remembered that it took the Jubi and Madara placing Sasuke's life in danger to activate them at a time when Karen had fallen for Sasuke's chakra. He believed that if he lost control of Kurama's chakra again, the combination of Karen's chains activating to try and save him from himself and Jiraiya would be able to stop him. Fu, however, needed to step away from Chome's chakra and learn to fight without it. Something that she had little practice in. So by leaving her in Konoha, he was placing her in a position where she still had to train and reach her goals, but do so without her Bijuu's power. Does that make sense? Lara 5170. He has the knowledge he needs, but at the moment his body is incapable of using most of it. So if he goes on the trip, it would be to finish the reconditioning of his body, and perhaps try to get in contact with Itachi in secret to stop his suicide plan. I haven't that far, but those would be the driving reasons behind the trip. As for Kabuto and Danzo, I haven't finalized their death change of allegiance yet. I promise I am working on it. If I do give Danzo to any of the enemies that he has made, it would most likely be to Nagato. Sonic Prophet. I apologize about the pairings not showing up, but some of them have not been finalized just yet, and some of them are proving challenging since I have to write some of the personality quirks from scratch, as they had little to no screen time in the anime or the manga. I will try to correct that in future chapters. Thank you for bringing that up. Big Bone Ninja. I am glad that I was able to clear up any of the confusion and problems that you had. Hello, people. Biju in human form, speaking. Hello, people. Biju in human form, thinking. Coded hand signals. Hello, Biju full demon form, summoning, deity yelling. Hello, Biju full demon form, summoning, deity talking. Hello, Biju full demon form, summoning, deity thinking. Hello, Jutsu. Asterisk 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 A storm's path. Asterisk 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 asterisk. The sun was shining and the birds were singing, yet despite the time, the Hidden Leaf Village was nothing but a hive of activity. Residents, tourists and guests alike were buzzing with anticipation as their patience was finally paying off. In just one short hour, the Chunin exam finals were going to begin. Many people had been waiting for this day just to try and see if their predictions on the matches were right. Many of them were placing bets on the outcomes, while others were just trying to find good seats. However, among the positive buzz of the civilians, the shinobi were tense. Sometime during the month of Konoha, Jonin, Hayate, was murdered by an unknown assailant. With the last bit of his strength, he was able to leave a message warning of a coming invasion. The higher-ranked shinobi weren't the only ones tense with a feeling of dread. The rookies that had not made the finals and were in the crowd were also very alert. They had known for far longer that the invasion was coming and had been preparing for it. However, there is nothing anyone can truly do to prepare for a war if they have never been in one. Even those that couldn't properly prepare. What they did know was that if Naruto and Sasuke didn't show up soon, they would be disqualified. Where are they already? Haku snapped, chakra beginning to leak out, chilling the air around her. Choji chuckled nervously as the people around them watched the girl wearily. I'm sure that they will be here soon, Haku. I think your chakra is beginning to make the atmosphere somewhat too cold for the land of fire natives though. Haku blinked at the boy and then laughed nervously. Sorry. Temper, Haku. I promise if neither of those boys show up soon, I'm gonna hunt them down myself. Zabuza said from next to her. Haku just nodded and began to glare at the arena floor where a similar conversation was taking place. Ino stopped twitching. I'm sure that Sasuke and Naruto will be here soon. Shikamaru sighed. Ino just twitched a little more and growled. Sighing, he looked to his side just in time to see Hinata and Neji give a respectful nod to each other. They seemed to have promised on an honest fight as shinobi and not Hyuga clan members, without talking. Troublesome. Shikamaru thought just as Fu perked up. Sasuke and Naruto are coming. Although I have to question their mental maturity if they are doing what I think they are doing. She informed the others, making them raise their eyes at the emphasis on the mental part. For the foreigners it was odd because they should be the same age physically and mentally, right? For the other genin they merely sighed. It meant that somehow the 31-year-old Hokage had managed to talk Sasuke into something reckless and childish. Hiruzen, it feels odd for us to be sitting here like this, doesn't it? Spoke to the elder Kage as he took his seat. Odd it does. I had never thought that I would get to see Kumo and Konoha side by side and not starting war on each other in my lifetime. I laughed at the retort, knowing that there was some veiled aggression in it. True enough. Is it always this windy here this time of year? He questioned as the Kage claimed his seat silently. Now that you mention it, no. Hiruzen said as the wind began to pick up speed. Before anyone could say anything, a twisting column of air descended from the sky and landed in the middle of the arena. Spinning out of existence just as quickly as it appeared, it revealed a medium-sized group at the center. Damn it, Dobi. How many times have I told you not to do that? Sasuke yelled as he regained his bearings. Did you want to be late? Naruto asked in amusement as he watched one of the Sannin attempt to hold in his breakfast and his Jonin struggle in vain to regain his footing. We wouldn't have been if we had picked up speed. Sasuke retorted angrily. Naruto had been using that technique ever since he developed it and never once gave any warning when he did. Suddenly the Toad Sage was standing in front of Naruto, pointing at his face. God damn it, Gaki. If you ever do that again, I will ensure that your line ends with you. I've told you a million times not to do that. He yelled and then turned away as he turned green once more. Naruto's response was to blow a raspberry, making the red-haired Kunoichi with them laugh. Kakashi merely groaned at their childishness and grabbed Jiraiya and Karen's shoulders without warning and used the shunshin to take them to the stands, making the green color turn darker on the Toad Sage. Jiraiya, please tell me you haven't found a way to turn into a toad naturally. You really are starting to look like one. Kakashi joked, making the Sannin glare before dashing out of sight. Kakashi, my eternal rival. You were almost unyouthfully late. Guy bellowed, making Kakashi point to where Naruto was glaring and twitching. Taking a deep breath, Guy shuddered as it almost seemed like the Nine Tails was behind Naruto, glaring just as heatedly. My bad, but seriously, you were almost late and you missed the briefing. Guy said cryptically in reference to the announcement of the invasion. Sorry. We would have been here yesterday, but we ran into some bandits that were harassing a town, and you know Naruto. He had to step in to save them, and since it was late when we dealt with the problem, they insisted that we stay the night. We somehow managed to sleep through our alarms, all of them, and only woke up about an hour ago. We were going to run here when Naruto pointed out that if we did that we wouldn't make it in time. So he decided to do that without warning. What even was that? Haku asked in curiosity. I'm not sure. He never did tell us the theory behind it, but I do know that is the weakest form of it. I'm not even sure what that technique is meant for. Kakashi confessed. Guy nodded and glanced towards Karen, who seemed to be chatting avidly with the Akamichi heir about the benefits of certain low-calorie food to the clan despite the high-calorie requirements for their jutsu. She seems happy. She's Naruto's cousin. Apparently she has a unique manifestation of one of the clan's abilities that Kusugakure was abusing. When her team died in the forest, Naruto decided to invoke part of the Uzu-Konoha Treaty regarding his clan members' safety and basically told the Kusakage to go himself in regards to her return. Obviously he wasn't happy, and when he actually tried to send some shinobi to retrieve her on our way back, Naruto sent them home in pieces. I don't think that he is going to try again. Kakashi informed the Jonin, making Guy's eyes widen. That was a bad idea. Kakashi merely nodded in agreement and looked at the rest of the Konoha Jonin for the genin. Are they ready for what is coming? As ready as they can be. In all honesty, I think that the only ones that are truly ready are Sasuke and Naruto, and only because of how much they have already lived through. Guy said in a quiet tone, making Kakashi nod once more. May I have your attention, please? A voice rang out from the arena, catching everyone's attention. The final round of the Chunin selection exams will now begin. I am the proctor for this phase, Shiranui Genma. The rules for this round are the same as the preliminary round. The fight ends once the opponent has forfeit, been incapacitated in any way, lost consciousness, or died. Any fighting after the match is called will result in an immediate disqualification. Now, if I could have everyone but Uchiha Sasuke and Rock Lee leave the arena floor, we can begin the first match of the finals. As everyone was leaving the arena, Naruto nodded to Sasuke, who returned the gesture. Your move, Orochimaru. They thought simultaneously. As Sasuke moved to stand across from Lee, he could tell that something was different. For some reason, though, he couldn't put his finger on what was different. Lee was staring at his opponent seriously, analyzing him. He knew that he had no chance of beating Sasuke, only Naruto could do that. However, he had to show that anyone could become an amazing shinobi if they put their heart and soul into their training. That a disadvantage doesn't automatically make you a bad shinobi. Begin. Genma called as soon as he saw that both were ready to start. For some reason, though, he didn't feel like he was proctoring a Chunin exam at all. The two genin were more reminiscent of Jonin for some reason. As soon as they got the go-ahead, the two shinobi dashed at each other, intent on ending the match quickly. In Sasuke's case, it was because he knew that a prolonged battle would wear him out too quickly, and that there was little to no chance of getting out of a battle against Lee with no injuries. As it was, Lee was always making sure that he was just out of range for eye contact. Sasuke's eyes widened as he quickly moved to block an attack that he hadn't even seen coming. Instead of stopping it like he thought he did, he went flying across the ring, colliding with the back wall. There was absolute silence in the arena as many people tried to take in what just happened. Naruto was one of many that were just as baffled. Sasuke grimaced as he pried himself from the wall and narrowed his eyes at Lee, who was standing still where he had been, never once taking his eyes off of him. Bringing his arms up to inspect them, he groaned as he saw a bruise already forming. A real dark bruise. Glancing back at the taijutsu user, his eyes narrowed further before opening in realization. Across the way, Lee's face broke into a grin as the realization showed on his face. You already figured it out. He praised, making Sasuke nod. I just can't figure out how. Sasuke replied. I'll tell you if you win. Lee promised, vanishing from sight once more. This time Sasuke dodged out of the way instead of blocking and kicked out as soon as Lee was forced to slow. His feet connecting with Lee's midsection, he pushed the boy back only a few feet and growled, pumping chakra into his legs. Reappearing in front of the startled boy, he kicked him once more. This time getting the desired effect of launching him across the arena. Just as I thought. How though? His chakra coils weren't developed enough for that. Sasuke thought as he quickly drew some shuriken and launched them at the older boy. Instead of dodging like everyone thought that he would, Lee merely swatted the stars from the air and then charged once more, this time drawing a collapsible bow staff from his hip pouch. Unsealing his sword, Sasuke met Lee's attack, and as their weapons collided, the sound of metal hitting metal could be heard. A metal staff. Surely you didn't forget my element, Lee. Sasuke chided as he channeled his Raiden chakra down the blade and into the staff, hoping to stun the green-clad boy. Of course not. Lee replied as the lightning never even made it to him. It has an array of seals to prevent just that. Tenten's father was more than happy to make it for me. Clever. With that exchange, the battle continued. However, Sasuke knew that it couldn't continue. Let's hope that this doesn't bite me in the later. He thought as he closed his eyes. Lee, capitalizing on an opening, swung the staff and froze in shock as it collided with a massive purple construct instead of Sasuke. Jumping backwards, he stared in shock at the creation. Susanoo. one of the strongest defensive jutsu of the Uchiha clan. Sasuke informed the boy. The being seemed human in form despite being made of chakra and only being a skeleton, but it was massive. I see. So this is the ultimate defense that the Uchiha clan supposedly possess. Said, raising an eyebrow. Hiruzen was staring quietly at the construct, his mind running a mile a minute. How had Sasuke gained the next stage of the Sharingan? Was Itachi already dead? What the hell had happened on the training trip? I'm very impressed, Lee. To go from having little chakra available at all to being able to convert it to elemental chakra and learn how to supplement your taijutsu with it, making it even more deadly in just a month, is something that you should be proud of. Sasuke complimented as Lee continued to study the ethereal creature. I needed something that could help me compete with ninjutsu users. That's when I realized that while I can't use ninjutsu or genjutsu, I could still do the water walking and the tree climbing exercises. That meant that I was not incapable of using chakra, I just didn't produce chakra at the same rate as everyone else because my coils are too small for that. The important part was that I could use chakra. So that meant I could develop an affinity for it as well. The ninja in Iwagakure use Doden chakra to harden their bodies in order to make it more difficult to injure them. Usually they do this through the use of a ninjutsu. However, since I could use my chakra internally all I wanted, since everyone has chakra, why not do the same? It almost took me all month to figure out how to do so internally instead of externally without sending myself to the hospital. I managed though. I really am impressed. You are making far more progress than before. Sasuke emphasized to ensure that Lee knew he had already surpassed his other self from Sasuke's future. Nodding, he relaxed his stance a little and stored his staff once more. I was fortunate enough that my chakra nature was in fact Doden. I have a long way to go though before I can fight you with it, as all the nature transformation has to be done internally for me, but I had to see if it would help me fight against you. The fact is that it can, but I am still not at your level. Plus I have a feeling that the technique you just used is only in its weakest form and I couldn't even scratch it. This match is yours, Sasuke. Just know that I will beat you one day. Proctor. I forfeit. I look forward to it, Lee. Sasuke responded, releasing the chakra around him as Genma declared him the winner. Applause rang out through the stadium as the result was called. Despite many of those in attendance not having seen most of the match due to the speed, they knew that something great had happened in the arena between the two that seemed to be friends. Next match. Nara Shikamaru vs. Aburame Shino. Genma called as the two silently made their way down. Naruto nodded at Sasuke as he returned to his side and made himself comfortable as he prepared to watch a fight of strategy over strength and technique. As the two took their places, their opponent carefully. Both knew that neither was the kind to fight recklessly or without a plan, but if they tried to outsmart one another, Orochimaru may start the invasion out of boredom. After a second they both twitched, realizing that they had come to the same realization. Troublesome. I agree. Shino intoned as the match was started. As soon as Genma finished speaking, Shikamaru had already finished a strand of seals, surprising the audience as he jumped away from Shino. Haijutsu. Kage no Atsumari. He called out quickly. Jumping away from his position to place more distance between them, Shino watched as the entire side of the ring Shikamaru was on filled with thick, almost solid shadows obscuring his vision. Narrowing his eyes, he cautiously sent a small group of Kikaichu at the inky darkness, only to watch as the shadows twisted and became Senbon, spearing the insects before they could get too close. Sorry Shino, but your Kikaichu won't be able to get near me. I have also already removed the female that you tagged me with. Shikamaru called out, his voice coming from almost everywhere and nowhere at once. I see. You have managed to make something akin to the Nadaime Hokage's Kakangyo no Jutsu. It works in reverse and is more of a ninjutsu instead of genjutsu. You conceal yourself, effectively blinding yourself, in a corporeal mass of shadow which acts as offense, defense, and a sensory field. Shino deduced, furrowing his eyes. That's not all it does, Shino. You are right that it materializes the shadows much like the clan's Kageyo's no Jutsu. However, it is much more than that. The Aburame are capable of controlling the battlefield with their Kikaichu by spreading them out and communicating with them. The Nara really can't do that, and most of our jutsu are supplementary. They really are only at their best when combined with the Akamichi and Yamanaka clan jutsu. This changes things. It allows the shadows in the immediate area to be used however we see fit. For example, Kage no Kanetsu no Mure. Shino felt his eyes widen as a swarm of what appeared to be Kikaichu made of shadows came flying at him, breaking from the dome. I will admit that the Nadime's counter to dojutsu users was inventive and somewhat of a base for this technique though. If yin-based jutsu can rob people of their sight, then what else can it do? After thinking over it, I realized that it could do anything as yin release is governed by the imagination. Granted, the Nara clan has never been very creative in that regard, but training with Naruto taught me that to succeed you can't stay in your comfort zone. You have to leave it in order to get strong enough to protect the things that you care about. This is my form of stepping out of my comfort zone. Or should I say into my comfort zone? Shikamaru chuckled. It is clever, but you aren't the only one that has been contemplating what he meant by that. I have my own interpretation that has shown their results. Shino replied as another swarm of insects left his coat. However, upon connecting with the shadow insects, instead of being skewered, they exploded and dispersed the shadows that made up the insects. Shikamaru felt his eyes widen at the weird kamikaze tactic from a clan that valued their hives. Kanchu o Bakahatsu sa Seru. The result of trying to combine my affinities into my Kikaichu to make them resistant to fire jutsu. It worked, as they are fire-proof, but they have drastically shorter lives compared to the rest of the Kikaichu breeds that we have. Due to this, with my father's help, we managed to make them into kamikaze attacks. They may have shorter lives, but they are much easier to breed and reproduce much faster as a result. It does hurt me to lose them, but they are living their lives to the fullest this way. Shino explained, and Shikamaru felt himself smirk at the tactic. My shadows versus your hybrids, huh? Let's see who can outlast one another then. Shikamaru smiled at the tactical challenge and sent another swarm of insects, but this time mixed them in with shadow kunai. In response, Shino threw kunai armed with flash tags to neutralize those as his insects took care of the fakes. The next several minutes were filled with loud explosions and flashes of light as they tried to outmaneuver one another. As it seemed that the explosions were dying down and the crowd got their eyesight back, they were once again treated to a surprising sight. The two genin from clans that specialized in mid-range fighting and tactics were engaged in a heated taijutsu match. Disengaging quickly, they both began to make the same seal. Kaden. Gokaku no Jutsu. They both called, releasing fireballs of roughly the same size. They collided in the middle of them and began to fight for superiority. Gritting his teeth, Shikamaru carefully began to craft another set of seals while still maintaining the fireball. Before he could finish them, however, the ground beneath him exploded as hundreds of insects poured out from the ground. Canceling the technique, Shikamaru glanced around at the arena and sighed, nodding to Genma. The winner is Aburame Shino. I take it that was the result of just combining your Doden with the Kikaichu. Pretty much. They are far more durable but are harder to breed and grow slower. Shino replied, holding his hand out to Shikamaru, who gladly accepted. What the hell was that, Shikamaru? Ino yelled from the stands, making him sweat drop. First she tells me to train harder and stop being so lazy and unmotivated, and when I do that she yells anyway. Shikamaru whined, making the crowd laugh. Why are blondes so troublesome? To annoy you, Shikamaru. Naruto yelled in reply. Shikamaru felt his head drop and a whine escape in response to his question. Around him the laughter grew. Those are some genin you seem to have, Hiruzen. Developing new jutsu and coming up with innovative ideas so soon out of the academy and at their age is something not many can boast. A commented, watching closely. Yes, well, they seem to have been motivated by two of their classmates lately. One you have already seen, Sasuke. I noticed that he seemed far beyond a typical genin. Having the same eyes that his older brother possesses at his age is truly a feat to be proud of. Yes, I agree. Not even Itachi had access to the Susanoo so young. Though I do worry that they are pushing themselves too far. Let them be. They are becoming stronger at a rate not seen since the Clan Wars era and making the village all the stronger for it. What is there to worry about? Rasa spoke for the first time. That is exactly why. You have heard the tales of the kind of shinobi that came from that era. 2 of our cage were from that era and one of our biggest traders. The world doesn't need strength like that anymore. Here is encountered. I have to agree. The world doesn't need strength like that anymore. Although there is nothing wrong with becoming stronger on your own. Perhaps they have already decided on their life goals and as a result know what they need to be able to do to achieve it. In that regard they should be left alone. I replied. We shall see. There are still 4 matches to go and when they are done perhaps we will have a better idea of what they are capable of and perhaps an idea of their goals. Hiruzen replied looking down at the remaining genin, his eyes focusing in on Naruto.